hair that cascaded down her back in soft waves, her flawless porcelain skin, and her deep green eyes that seemed to see into the very soul of those who met her. She was the epitome of grace. At 35, she was in the prime of her life, and on the surface, she had everything. A successful husband, a thriving Isabel Hartman had always been admired for her beauty and elegance. With her striking Auburn career as a literature professor and a life that many envied. But behind the perfect facade, Isabel felt a gnawing emptiness. Her husband, Richard, was a man consumed by his work as a high-powered attorney. Their marriage, once filled with passion and excitement, had gradually become a series of routine interactions, polite conversations over dinner, shared responsibilities, and the occasional public display of affection that felt more like a performance than a genuine expression of love. The connection they once shared had faded, replaced by a sense of obligation and the weight of unspoken resentments. It was in the midst of this emotional void that Gabriel Knight entered Isabel's life. Gabriel was one of her students, a young man in his late 20s who had taken a few years off after high school to travel and find himself before returning to complete his degree. He was tall, with a lean, athletic build, dark hair that was always slightly tousled, and piercing blue eyes that held an intensity that drew people in. From the moment Gabriel walked into her classroom, Isabel felt an inexplicable connection to him. He was different from her other students, mature beyond his years, with a deep appreciation for the literature they studied. He was passionate about learning, always eager to discuss the themes and characters in the novels they read. He often stayed after class to continue their conversations, and Isabel found herself looking forward to these discussions more than she cared to admit. As the semester progressed, their relationship deepened. What had started as a teacher-student dynamic slowly evolved into something more personal. They shared a mutual love for poetry and classical literature, and their conversations often veered into topics that were far removed from the curriculum, philosophy, art, and even the complexities of life and love. Isabel found herself opening up to Gabriel in ways she hadn't with anyone else, sharing her thoughts, her fears, and her dreams. Gabriel, for his part, was captivated by Isabel. She was unlike any woman he had ever known, intelligent, cultured, and breathtakingly beautiful. He admired her strength and poise, but he also sensed the vulnerability beneath her polished exterior. He could see the sadness in her eyes, the way she would sometimes drift off in the middle of a conversation, lost in thoughts she never voiced. He wanted to know more about her, to understand the woman behind the professor. It was during one of their after-class discussions that Gabriel made a bold move. They had been talking about F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, discussing the tragic love story at the heart of the novel. As the conversation grew more intimate, Gabriel found himself blurting out, "Do you believe in soulmates, Isabel?" The use of her first name caught her off guard, but she didn't correct him. Instead, she looked at him thoughtfully, her heart skipping a beat. "I used to," she admitted softly, "but life has a way of making you question things you once believed in." Gabriel leaned forward, his gaze intense. "And now?" Isabel hesitated, feeling a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time, a connection, a spark. "Now, I think it's complicated. Love isn't as simple as we like to think it is." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Isabel could feel her pulse quickening, the blood rushing in her ears as she realized just how dangerous this conversation was becoming. She quickly changed the subject, steering the conversation back to the novel, but the moment had left a mark on her, a lingering sense of something more. As the semester drew to a close, the university announced a study trip to Thailand for a select group of students. The trip was designed to immerse the students in the country's rich culture, with visits to historical sites, temples, and natural wonders. Isabel was chosen to lead the trip, and when she saw Gabriel's name on the list of participants, her heart skipped a beat. She knew that spending time with him in such close quarters, away from the confines of the classroom, would be risky, but she couldn't bring herself to object. The trip to Thailand was everything Isabel had hoped it would be. The country was a feast for the senses, vibrant colors, exotic scents, and a warmth that seemed to permeate everything. The group spent their days exploring ancient temples, wandering through bustling markets, and marveling at the natural beauty of the landscape. But it was the evenings, when the sun set over the horizon and the air was thick with the scent of jasmine, that the tension between Isabel and Gabriel became almost unbearable. One evening, after a particularly long day of sightseeing, the group returned to their hotel, which was nestled along the shores of a secluded beach. Isabel was restless, her mind filled with thoughts of Gabriel and the emotions she had been trying so hard to suppress. She decided to take a walk along the beach, hoping the cool night air and the sound of the waves would calm her racing thoughts. As she walked along the shoreline, the moon casting a silver glow over the water, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see Gabriel approaching, his expression unreadable, but his eyes fixed on hers. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, his voice low and intimate in the quiet of the night. Isabel shook her head, feeling a flutter of nervous excitement. "No, I guess not. It's hard to relax in such a beautiful place. There's just so much to think about." Gabriel nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "It's not just the place, is it?" Isabel's breath caught in her throat. She knew what he was asking, knew where this conversation was headed, but she couldn't bring herself to stop it. Instead, she looked out at the dark waves crashing against the shore, trying to steady her racing heart. "No, it's not just the place," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Gabriel took a step closer, the space between them shrinking until they were standing just inches apart. He reached out and gently took her hand, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through her. "Isabel," he murmured, his voice filled with a longing that mirrored her own. "I can't stop thinking about you." Her resolve crumbled in that moment, all the barriers she had built around her heart falling away. She turned to face him fully, her eyes searching his for any sign of doubt, but all she saw was the same desire she felt reflected back at her. Without another word, Gabriel pulled her into his arms and kissed her. It was a kiss that had been building for months, full of all the passion and intensity they had both been holding back. Isabel melted into him, her body responding to his in ways she had only dreamed about. The feel of his hands on her skin, the taste of his lips, the sound of the waves crashing around them, it was intoxicating, overwhelming, and she never wanted it to end. They made their way back to the hotel, their hands entwined as they stole through the quiet halls. Once inside Isabel's room, the tension that had been simmering between them finally exploded. Clothes were discarded in a frenzy of passion, their bodies coming together with a desperate urgency that left them both breathless. The night was a blur of heated kisses, whispered confessions, and urgent caresses. Isabel felt alive in a way she hadn't in years, every touch, every glance igniting a fire inside her that she hadn't known existed. Gabriel was everything she had imagined and more, his touch both tender and possessive, as if he was claiming her as his own. For hours, they explored each other's bodies, the intensity of their connection growing with every moment. It was as if they were the only two people in the world, their love making an escape from the reality that waited outside the walls of the hotel room. Isabel lost herself in the sensation of his lips on her skin, The way he whispered her name like a prayer, the way he made her feel desired, cherished, loved. But as the night turned to dawn and the first light of morning began to filter through the curtains, reality came crashing down around Isabel. She woke up in Gabriel's arms, the events of the night before flooding back with a mix of guilt and sorrow. She had crossed a line she had sworn never to cross, and now there was no going back. The morning after their night of passion, the weight of what they had done hung heavily in the air. Isabel and Gabriel lay in bed, the sheets tangled around them, their bodies still pressed close together. For a moment, it felt as though the world had stopped, as though they could stay in this cocoon of warmth and intimacy forever. But as the light grew brighter and the day began to break, the reality of their situation became impossible to ignore. Isabel pulled away from Gabriel, sitting up and wrapping the sheet around her body. Her heart was pounding, her mind racing with the implications of what they had done. She had betrayed her husband, crossed a line with her student, and now she was left with the crushing guilt of her actions. Gabriel reached out to touch her, but Isabel flinched, moving out of his reach. "Isabel, please."